I was recently on a call with a client and we were talking about some of the benefits of Airtable. And so I decided to chop that up into a couple different clips. Here's one of them about how Airtable is set up and the structure of Airtable that I think really serves a painting project management. So if you've ever considered managing your projects, your painting projects inside of Airtable, this is some stuff that I think you might find interesting. And love to hear your comments, questions below. What else would you like to see? And we'll do that in the next video. Different ways that you could look at reports or analysis is that, and this is more concepts on how Airtable is set up, right? So you have your table of projects. There's 166 properties that are part of projects. Right now, I'm looking at a view that's my benchmarking view that only shows the fields that I care about for benchmarking. So I can, on any one of these, I could just click hide, just similarly to like you would in Excel. But the difference is that when I hide it, it's like I can, like in Excel, if you hide something, but then you copy, it actually keeps that row copied. And when you paste it, in this, it's like, basically it's its own new thing. And it's like that other thing doesn't exist for purposes in this. You could then go a step further and say, I want to group this by crew leader. And then I can see like all jobs that Rob oversaw versus David Pitts. If I wanted to change this to, because they call their crew leaders, or basically supervisors are crew leaders. So we need to change this for you guys. What's the other name I was going to do? Job leader. So if I wanted to sort by, group by estimator, I could do the same thing where I'm looking at how an estimator did. And you could even see like, instead of looking at the sum, we could see like their average gross profit or whatever. Like, see what I'm saying? Like you can slice up the data into whatever way makes sense. You could filter out, like, I only want to see jobs that are complete, which in me just saying that kind of makes sense to me, that on the benchmarking sheet, we wouldn't show jobs that aren't complete, but this is one way. Are you guys tracking so far? So this is kind of related to what I was, and this is where I wanted to get feedback on what would be useful to you. What I started working on was a dashboard for people, like for your crew leaders to see. And then you can actually go in and start looking at productivity for that given person. But then I also did another version of this. So if I want to look at production dashboard, so you can do things like, I think like what you're saying, we're making a pivot table. And so I guess my question would be, give me an example really quick of what you want to see, and we'll see if it's possible. So I tried to do, that's what I was doing in this one. The part I probably need to take this off for now. I made a bunch of filters that are filtering out the active user. So like, because I'm the builder, like I need to essentially remove all these filters in order to show everything. But I can see like productivity by month, or and that's one thing that I saw. There was a couple questions I had on like form completions or something like that. Wasn't quite sure how that is calculated. But yeah, at least from what I've seen, I guess I would always go back to, okay, you guys have a report. Why do you have that report? And if we can't make it identical, can we still achieve the same purpose of the report through something else? You can see it's like the benefit of having your reports built in the tool that you're analyzing them in is that, like, for here, if I want to see like rust buyers, and the data, I could clean this up, or once it's built correctly, but it just doesn't look complete because we're missing so much time tracking data from, like, a year ago that would actually give us realistic gross profits. And the data only has one estimator, who is Russ right now. But if we change the data to have a lot more, assign different crew leader or different sales reps, then you could see that. But like, for example, Russ has, again, these aren't realistic gross profits because the time tracking data is missing. But let's say he's at 83% of exteriors. I could then open this up and I can see these are the projects, and this is the gross profit on every project that's referring to. So that's if there are, well, going back to the ones that you guys had mentioned, because that's what I want to create, is that when we show this to production, they actually see basically the same reports that they're used to. Um, but it's just like it's going to look a little bit different. But if they're going to dashboards right now to look at stuff, we need to make sure that we have those built when they go, like when this goes live, because
Right.
the what I'm realizing is yes, we could build a lot of these after the fact, but it's also not terribly difficult to add a report, even if it's sparse with data. If it's built right, we have to build it now or later. Might as well build it, and then as data starts coming in, you see that. So what I did was I added a field here. I think it's in this field. So you have, again, when I look at a job, I'm going to have a pushback request link. So I click that link, and that's going to open up a form. Everything is form based. It's just all tied to specific projects. So just showing you here, if I go ahead and say I want to request 10 hours, the deck needs a lot of work. So I submit this. Then what happens is inside of the supervisor dashboard, back over here, uh, they have a section of pushback approvals that would populate. So if I have multiple, I would see multiple. And again, just to show an example, if I put another one in here for this random job, um, I go ahead and say pushback request. And this one I'm going to say 20 hours, 25 for testing the paint. And I submit that. So now in the job leader or the supervisor dashboard, they're going to see two jobs that are the status of the pushback request is requested, and the other one says requested. And so I could go in and say on this job that the hours that I'm approving is not 25 hours. I'm only going to approve 15. And now I'm going to say that this is approved. And I could say, I agree, whatever. Now I'm done with that one. And now it disappeared off my interface here. So now I just have one left over here. And this one I could say, you know, nope, this one's declined. And then it goes away. And then the part that doesn't exist right now, but would be when a request comes in, like there's a notification to somebody, or once it's declined or approved, the crew leader gets a text or something that's like, hey, John declined your pushback request. And then the other thing, again, just that I think is so cool is that back to the benchmarking thing. If there were any pushback hours that were approved, they're automatically in the wherever the pushback hours are. They get pulled in automatically only if it is approved, and then if it's declined, then it doesn't show. And the same thing goes for like AWOs as well. So one way of doing this would be we could have this pushback approval thing be on the sales dashboard, not the supervisor. But also, we could potentially make it so that the supervisor, like you could have an intermediary step. Yeah. So we could have another, like just literally add another field that's like supervisor. Okay. And then with these fields, there's always a balance of like, I'm never sure what to include or not include. But I put in this is like total requested hours, how many have gotten approved. I don't know if there's ever multiple pushbacks. Um, and then this is the estimated plus AWO hours. And then this is like your new total with estimated AWO and pushback approved, all of it. Um, and in this case, there's no pushback approved. But if I change this to approved, then my new total hours is 82. So again, I don't like down here. Is it helpful to see who the estimator was, who the job leader was, who the crew leader, when you're making like in this snapshot of making a decision, or is this stuff clutter? And do we just keep it? And I guess I feel like even with saying all this is like I just want to keep emphasizing there's so many little tiny things, and the goal is that like that I want to keep bringing these things up, because if you're like, I don't care about the cover photo, like why do we have that there? Like you just click on it and remove it. And that does literally nothing other than just take it off of this particular interface that you're working. It still exists everywhere else. It's just the constant battle of like, how do we streamline the jobs of the people that have to do various things? And so just know that I would advise that some, like, again, are the ones that are uh, owning like the optimization and improvement of these little tiny things that are just like, hey, we had a meeting and everybody decided that we really need to see the phone number of the crew leader or something. Most of the stuff that we are building, pushback approvals, this thing with the sidebar, this is not possible on mobile. But to clarify, like we can still do the same thing more or less. It's just like instead of having this sidebar with like a list that you click on, it would be something like this, which is mobile friendly, and you've got cards, and then I have tabs instead of the drop down thing here. So I think what I started building, this is my other one for log new expense. And so this is, you click log new expense, very similar to that other one where it's going to autofill the project that you're working on. It defaults to materials and today's date, but you could, if we have, I don't know if these types or if these are correct types for you guys. And then vendor and description is optional. I don't know if we want to make that required. The amount is required, and then they would upload an image. So this can all be done on their phone as well. But when you do this, that goes and populates. So this is, yeah, project. It defaults to materials, date, vendor, and description is optional, amount, and then the receipt image. When you submit this, so I'll just do this again, gas station. And then I upload an image, let's say, whatever. Back in Airtable, we have a database of all of our expenses, which is similar to what you probably do in Smartsheets. The only difference is that it's now logged or tied to this particular project. And again, that is automatically summed in the benchmarking to be able to see what our total expenses are on that project. If you were just logging like, hey, I need to not have this tied to anything, I would just delete the project and we would make this not required. Right now it's required, but we could say that's optional. And then when I put in my notes here, and this is $200, same thing happens. Oh, except now it's saying it's required. So pretend like it wasn't there. And then when you come back to here in your expenses, you would have a new item and this would just not be associated. So then it's not going to roll up to a project because there isn't a project. So that would be one option. I guess the next thing would be like, where do you need to realize those expenses? Um, and like the other ones, is there, what else happens after you submit the form for expenses that are not tied to a project? My thought right now, to because as much as possible there's benefit to just consolidating like data. So like all expenses I do think should be in one table. And then if this is like, well, this is annoying and it's cluttering, I don't want to see the stuff that's not relevant to jobs or whatever, that's where you go back to, I'm just going to create a new grid. And this could be like non-job expenses or whatever we want to end up calling that. And now again, this is the part that I love about Airtable is I can say it's still the same underlying data, but on this non-job expenses, like let's say we add a new one that's called, so we could say that's another option here. And then if one of these was marked as that, um, we could then say in this filtered group or in this view, I only want to see expenses where the type is non-job expense. And again, I could hide other ones like all these project fields don't matter because it's not tied to a project. And now I'm basically just looking at that. And then you go a step further and say, I want to group it by projects or whatever. If you're going to group by, or if you want to group by something like vendors, you actually has to be a drop down or a linked record. So this is just a text field. So if that's needed, then that might be something that we want to do as well. It depends. But yeah, that's how I would say that we should probably stick with this, and then we could just make a different form that, because only the office would ever log expenses that aren't tied to a job, right? Or based on this, is there anything that you would change right now so that the task is done and I'm not making a random task for something that's going to take 30 seconds later? But is this all look like appropriate type of expenses? Carpentry and cabinets, that seems like not necessary, because wouldn't we be able to know based on the project type? And then with the job expense, it's fine to just say materials, additional, and travel. Project, addition, not additional. So project, and then that off, and then these. Yeah, basically we would just, anyone that you're treating as a subcontractor, we would put in your people table and then list them as that. And then we're good. Again, for the benchmarking piece or part of this, that's in this table. We would show a separate column for, I think right now I called it materials, and oh yeah, I just have materials, but we would probably also want one for equipment or lift specifically. Yeah, so I'm just going to call it equipment. And then that would be, we have materials, equipment, and then our total job expense would sum the wages. Yeah. We basically have a separate column that's materials, equipment expense, and subcontractors. And those are 3 separate columns, and the job costing. Okay, so I'm going to say, because we're always going to have the total job expense column, which is ultimately what's used in the calculation. And then we would just show like materials here. We're going to say, I want to see the expense table where the type, whoops. So this one's going to be where the type is material and the sum. Yeah, so that's that. I also just realized we have a whole different subcontractor payments process, which is worth having it not be in your expenses, because I don't know if I showed this to you guys yet, but on the subcontractor jobs, if I can find a subcontractor, this is nice because if you have subs, they obviously care about what they're making more and like to know when they're getting paid next and all that stuff. So like I'll go to, so on the projects that he is assigned to, great, you can see that in this view, and this is what subcontractors see, they see what they're going to get paid. And then separately, you have your office manager who pays subcontractors, has a dashboard of who gets or who still needs to be paid or what's outstanding. And so that's all going to come in from this view, which is subcontractor payments. And then it shows you a list of, these are the amount that's still owed to the person. So then when you pay, or when you go to pay that amount, you click log payment, or that person would, and then they're going to just fill out the check number that was paid and the event that it was for, and the subcontractor is auto filled for them. And then this populates into that table automatically. Your subcontractor expenses are not going to be in your expense table. Thanks so much for watching. If you're new, my name is Chris, the owner of Boolean Automation, where our mission is to free you up to do what you love. We do that primarily by automating the mundane, boring, mind-numbing tasks that exist in the back office of painting and home service companies. But we also have a review software that helps you crush it in your local market and outdo everybody else as far as Google reviews go. So if either one of those are valuable or interesting, don't hesitate to reach out. If you have been considering using Airtable for your project management, I want to just share this episode that I did with going through some of nuts and bolts of how Airtable is set up and some of the different things that you can do in Airtable. So this is me just walking through some of the latest features that I have created inside of Airtable for our clients, and would love to show this to you. Let me know what you found most interesting, what's most valuable, what could save you the most time, and drop that in the comments down below. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next video.